feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We are brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Friday morning. It's April 11th after the Wolves' 16-point win over the Memphis Grizzlies on Thursday night. And coming up on today's show, we will discuss that game that featured probably the best Edwards and Randle in tandem pairing duo game of the season and how the Wolves generated that offense for both Edwards and Randle. We'll also talk about the Wolves' 52-point third quarter last night that put away the Grizzlies after the Wolves actually entered that third quarter down by 5 at halftime. And we'll also look ahead to the weekend. Games against Brooklyn and Utah at home, of course, and we'll try and set up how the Wolves factor into these Western Conference standings if they do beat Brooklyn and Utah. If they win both. They do have a top 6 seed. They're out of the play-in that is locked up. All that and more coming up with Kyle Theige. First, let you know that this episode is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and Falling Knife is the spot to watch the Wolves this weekend, whether it's Wolves Nets tonight, Friday night, or Wolves Jazz on Sunday afternoon. Always, Wolves games are on at Falling Knife, but even more so, Falling Knife is the place to watch Wolves playoff games outside this spring. Falling Knife will again have the gigantic TV truck outside as they did last spring, where they had hundreds of people surrounding that big screen out there. So when you're planning your Wolves watching experiences in the coming weeks for the playoffs, keep Falling Knife in Northeast in mind. You bring a long chair, plenty of room to watch the Wolves on the big screen outside there. I do also want to note an option to donate to the family of Tom Berg, who we talked about a couple days ago. Tom was one of the owners of Falling Knife, a huge Wolves fan who passed away over the weekend. There is a GoFundMe that has been set up for the family of Tom Berg. The link to that is in the show notes below of this episode. Otherwise, you can just Google GoFundMe Tom Berg, TomBerg. All right, we are now joined by Kyle Theige. Kyle, Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle combined to score 75 points last night on just 41 shots, 44 points for Edwards, 31 for Randle, a combined 26 of 41 from the field. Would you say this was the best Edwards and Randle, like in tandem as a duo game this season?
Yeah, I had the entire game. I was thinking about NBA Jam. About how when you pick the two players, like that's what it's supposed to look like when I select Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle. Just like a perfect combination of Ant spacing the floor. I mean, he said after the game that his mission was to black out. Ironically, that was my mission after the Milwaukee game, but he just couldn't be stopped. Memphis had no one to guard him. Obviously, the Jalen Wells injury from the other night hurt Memphis because he really, even as a rookie, gave Ant all sorts of fits, but his ability to just hit any three he wanted, and then Julius to kind of be the, like thunder and lightning type thing. Like he was the thunder to Ant's lightning, and to
like
get
Lendale White to Chris Johnson.
Exactly. I just thought the best parts of Julius, and we'll talk about what happened in the second half, or in the fourth quarter, I should say. But the best parts of Julius, I thought, was just getting guys into the mid range, kind of walking them down. He attacked Zach Edey. Zach Edey had nothing for him. But yeah, that's I would imagine, right? When Tim Conley makes the trade 48 hours before media day, he's like, okay, this is what it would look like if we went from, I don't want to say finesse with Ant and Carl, but a little more like thunder and lightning, a little more physicality. Julius was awesome on the rebounds too. Like that was his best game after 48 hours ago. I mean, not a dud against Milwaukee, but he looked really bad against the Bucks. And to biggest game of the season, they needed that one. Those two guys are your two best players right now, and they both kind of balled out.
Can you recall the one other game this season that both Edwards and Randle had 30 in the same game?
Was it against the Suns?
That was the second best one I had down in my notes. In the buzzer beater game where Randle hits the buzzer beater. That was Randle had 35, 4, and 7. Edwards in that game had 24, 7, and 4. Didn't shoot that well.
Okay.
The other game the only other time other than last night that they both scored 30 in a game was 78 games ago. That second game of the season in Sacramento, where that was where Ant after the game said, Julius, we'll fit around you sort of thing. They clearly let that idea go away in the ensuing 78 games. But that's what I mean. What I'm saying is, like, this one made the most sense. Again, the Sacramento game was good. Julius played really well. That Phoenix game to hit that buzzer beater, little Julius step back in front of a Kogi, like those were definitely good games. But if we are comparing those to last night as the best games those two have had in tandem, I think this one takes the cake for sure. And for me, it's about Randle in there. We've seen Ant have big. It's not like we haven't seen Julius have big games too, but there's a little bit more of a predictable randomness to, like, Ant's just going to have his games where he has 35, 40 plus and goes supernova in the way that he did last night. To me, the Randle part was so encouraging, and right away from the beginning of the game. You mentioned the Edey part of it. I was just going back and watching the Randle possessions back, but just for the first quarter, this is the first 4 minutes of the game. Randle's first 5 possessions where he shoots a shot or passes to someone who shoots a shot. They scored all 5 of those possessions. It was 4 of the 5 times where Rudy Gobert, who's being guarded by Zach Edey, comes, screens for Julius. Now Julius has Zach Edey on a switch. That was a bucket 3 times. 2 of them were just step back threes, and another time he drove and kicked to, I think it was McDaniels for a 3. And then the 5th possession was Jaden McDaniels came and switched for Julius Randle, and now Desmond Bane, who is guarding Jaden, is guarding Julius. The game plan was get Jaren Jackson Jr. off of Julius Randle, let him attack a more advantageous matchup, which was literally anyone else. I mean, Rudy's just the best screener, and Edey's probably the most susceptible there. But I even think the Jaden thing serves as a good example of if you keep Julius Randle in advantageous spots, then you keep him out of disadvantageous spots. And that's, I think, part of the Julius Randle, like, conundrum is there is a difference in reality between him going at Desmond Bane or him going at Zach Edey versus him going at Jaren Jackson Jr. And if you're a player and you're prideful and you're made second team All NBA before, you are a legit scorer, there's a temptation if you're Julius Randle to be like, I can take anybody one-on-one, and he kind of can. But the point is, and what this is getting through this collective team's head, is there's better ways for Julius to attack, for Ant to attack, for anyone to attack. It doesn't, just because you have the ball in isolation does not make it the best offensive situation there. There are better and worse setups for it. I thought Finch, Randle, everybody on board right away at the beginning set the tone with that. And I think Julius had 12 points and 4 assists in the first quarter. Played 10 minutes. They lost the 6 minutes he was off the floor, won the 6 minutes he was on the 10 minutes he was on the floor. I thought it was just really important the way they established Randle, so Edwards had somebody to go with him, like, and again, Ant's had these games before, but who has been the other guy, the release valve, or just somebody when he gets tired, which check out the fourth quarter, Ant didn't score. You need that other guy, and Julius was that all night.
Yeah, and I know we're not doing this right now, but I can't help but have some leftover takes from that Milwaukee game of watching Julius in that one, because my whole thing was, as they're blowing a 24-point lead in the fourth quarter because they're giving up a 23-0 run, it sounds really stupid because I think they lost by 7 or 8, but all you need in those spots when you've built up that much of a lead is 4 points. Like, you really just need a couple buckets, right? Because it does, like, multiply how much harder it is to come back in a huge deficit like that. And I remember watching the game, and, like, I think Julius said last night post game that he was sick leading into that Milwaukee game. I think he told Chris and John that. But he just didn't get good looks, or he didn't make good shots. And last night when when the Grizzlies are making that comeback, I thought Julius got back to his spots that he's really comfortable in, kind of that mid-range, punishing smaller guys if he gets them on the switch. And then he hit those just couple, still scary this morning, huge high arcing fadeaway shots. But those, I mean, everyone contributed last night in a must-win situation to winning that game and have a 52-point third quarter. But again, when Ant, one of my big things, in because they're going to have these big leads, and how do they handle them? If Ant is getting blitzed as hard as he is, and they're just, you can't do it, who on this team is the second option. And we've done the poll, right, of like, who's the second best player on the team? Probably Rudy. Maybe it's Jaden sometimes. Neither of those guys is even a priority, second part. Like, those guys aren't going to be able to get you a bucket when you need one late in a game. And I thought, as good as Julius was in the first quarter, and then obviously everyone was good in the third, his ability to just get to his sweet spots, a thing I kind of always complain about Ant still, maybe doesn't have mid-range spots yet that he goes to. When it was starting to fall apart, I thought Julius kept them together, and that's something that, again, 48 hours ago, he didn't do in Milwaukee. So
6 of 7 from mid-range for Julius last night.
And many factors kind of went into that spiral for a little bit in the fourth quarter, but I also thought there were times where the Grizzlies were like, please keep shooting threes. I know Julius was 5 for 10 last night from 3. You are a numbers guy. I don't know if you can bank on Julius being a 50% three-point shooter in the playoffs, but he also kind of got baited a little bit into taking some bad shots. And then once he got back into the mid-range or around the rim, and then also, too, when they did get a couple stops, because this is just the Julius Randle segment, when they got some stops in the fourth, I thought his rebounding he just grabs nasty rebounds. Like, he just, like, you hear like an oomph when he grabs the ball. He led the team in rebounding. But, yeah, to kind of bring it all back, those two guys, whether or not you think they are the two best players on the team, obviously Ant is kind of pinned up there at the top, but they need those two guys to play as the two best players on their NBA Jam duo moving forward, because when they don't have both of them, it makes it a lot harder for Ant. And if it's all Julius, like we saw in that random Knicks game, it's not how a healthy relationship. They need both of them to play really well. And last night, like you said, they were the two best players on the court for Minnesota.
Yeah, and they need to pick at the right things. You know, we're talking about that with Julius.
Organically,
you know, and having that be the game plan. I mean, for Ant, you know, he had a pretty clear directive of what to pick at. Jalen Wells gets hurt in the Grizzlies' last game, so now, you know, it's Vince Williams guarding you. It's Scottie Pippen Jr., who's like 6 foot flat. I thought Scottie Pippen did the better job guarding Ant last night, but that's a clear thing, you know, going into the game, right? Like, here we go. Ant has, if you can get him, you can play him off ball, you can raise him up from a pin down, he can catch an attack, right, where the defense can't load up on him. Then it's Ant versus Vince Williams, right? It's Ant versus Scottie Pippen Jr. You're going to take that. Or if you want to have him initiate, you want to have him at the top. We know exactly what happens there too. Okay, you got a guy on Ant who can't handle him one-on-one. Look at the last 25 games against Denver over the last few years. What happens then? They bring the big up. They bring a second guy up to put 2 on the ball on Ant. And now you get into pick and roll game, finding Rudy or Randle on the short roll, and you're playing 4-on-3 because they've dedicated 2 to Ant, right? Like, this is the pattern. We know this stuff with the 80 games. We know how it has to work. The thing is it doesn't always get executed, or I think last night what stood out to me is they were executing it so quickly, right? They normally like figure it out over the course of a game. There's been very few games where you're like, what are you doing this whole time, Ant or Julius? But they were doing it right away from the beginning. Ant understood the assignment there. We're picking on their lack of a 2 to guard Edwards, and we're picking on Zach Edey if we can get Julius Randle, him to be guarding Julius Randle. Like, that's the game plan. That's the offense. And, you know, sure enough, they have an offensive rating of like 135, one of their best offensive games of the entire series or season. But you do that by figuring that out right away and executing it. And I thought Randle did. It was very clear in the first 4 minutes, but I thought Ant did that for the first 36 minutes. You know, over the first 3 quarters, he got that, understood that, and had 44 points, and the Wolves up by 20 going into the fourth quarter. Again, which I know sounds scary to people, but like, that's the goal, right? Like, that's the goal. He delivered there as well, because they Memphis had nobody for him, and this is an advantageous matchup for the Wolves offense for sure.
I have a couple other Julius things that are kind of bigger picture, but they tie into where we are at this morning, looking ahead to the weekend. But I had this, I think this is from I think it's like Seth Young or something on Twitter, but interesting 3-point stat for Ant, just because, again, he was 7 for 11 last night. He's now 312 for 764 from 3 on the season. He's shooting 39.7%. Steph Curry is 302 for 764. They've taken the exact same amount of threes, but Steph is shooting 39.5%. Ant is shooting 39.7%. And they play the Nets tonight. They play the Jazz on Sunday. We're going to fail playoffs. think it's just a moment in time where we should take a moment of silence and just be like, holy shit, this kid is out shooting the greatest to ever do it. And that was on display last night as well. I mean, so many Julius things to still talk about, but Ant literally just said last night, and he said it post game, and he sounds like he said it pregame, they have no one to stop me. I have to go full superstar mode. And I don't think we're talking about this Julius stuff if we don't have a big time performance from Ant in those first 3 quarters.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, right? There's 5 players in the league who shot more than 10 threes per game this season. Steph Curry, Anthony Edwards, Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, and Jason Tatum. The other 3 guys are shooting 35% or less from 3 in that time. Anthony Edwards and Steph Curry are shooting a hair under 40%. This game is, as it's moving towards 3-point, being more 3-point centric, it's about volume, right? Those are, we don't look at Jason Tatum and be like, don't take those.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a hell of a lot more powerful. Again, over 760 attempts over the course of the season. If you're hitting those at a 40% clip versus 35% clip, yeah, unambiguously the 2 most dominant self-creation 3-point shooters in the league, and frankly, 2 of the most dominant self-creation 3-point shooting seasons in the history of the NBA, and that leaves a lot of room, and has left a lot of room for Ant to, be more slowly computing this or that, or, leaving something to be desired on the defensive end. But when you are getting a more engaged Ant with the power of the volume and accuracy of that 3-point shooting, then yeah, that's how you start making the case for this is a first or second team All NBA guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so much power in that.
And again, I just the stat line, I don't ever want to be successful enough in life where I, take for granted the good things I have or how good the food. Like, he had 44 points on 13 of 19 shooting, 7 or 11 from 3, and he also got to the free throw line 13 times. Right? He did everything you wanted. And it's kind of crazy because I thought Julius-Randle played one of his best games. Maybe it's the best game just because what was on the line for the Wolves.
I would say so, yeah.
But also, you probably thought in those 36, 38 minutes, man, Julius is playing really physical. 0 free throw attempts.
Yeah.
Which is kind of stood out this morning of man, he was in there grabbing all these rebounds and he never got to the line. And I thought he got a little, perturbed by the officiating, but it seemed like he did a good job of kind of reining it in, which I don't think they did a great job against Milwaukee. So yeah, that duo, when they needed them the most, played their best game together. And that's probably the takeaway from Wolves Memphis. You saw a playoff Ant, but you also saw what a second banana can look like for him, and they needed it last night.
I want to talk about that third quarter. Wolves scored 52 points, one of their most impressive quarters of the season. But grab our first break here because I think Ant and Julius lead into that as well. Today's show is brought to you by Treasure Island Resort and Casino. Kyle and I were there for a watch party last weekend, and the Parlay Lounge at Treasure Island Resort and Casino is your place to watch all Timberwolves and Wild playoff games. All the games will be on at Parlay, and TI will be running drink specials during every game. Treasure Island is also teaming up with both the Wolves and the Wild to host official watch parties during select road games. That'll be like last weekend when Kyle and I were there. We got free food, drinks, guest appearances. Pooh Richardson was there with us last weekend, and they have some really big prize giveaways. When we were there, they gave away a signed Ant jersey, and they are going to be giving away a fully funded road trip that includes airfare for 2 with lodging for 2 nights and 2 tickets to a game for a Wolves playoff game. So stay tuned to www.ticasino.com for more information on that, and we'll try and let you know here as well. Treasure Island Resort and Casino is the exclusive casino partner of the Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Wild. Kyle, also let's get to prize picks right now. We got a Wolves game again tonight. When I was looking at it, I just saw Rudy Gobert 11 rebounds, and I'm thinking about the Brooklyn game a week ago when they played Brooklyn. I think Rudy had 18 in that game. Rudy kind of knows that his job is against these type of teams to keep the Wolves on the train tracks. I think he does and will. And so I had him more than 11 rebounds in tonight's game. I don't know if you did Wolves or you did Masters. What do you have for prize picks this week?
Well, as always, a reminder, we're doing this on Friday morning, so it's Flex Friday over at Prize Picks. You opt in. I don't know if it's up there yet. It might take a little bit, but you opt in. I think it matches up to like $30, $35. You can just basically have an entry, and if you lose it, you get your money back in credit. So it's always a fun little way to do something. Wolves Nets tonight. We'll talk about it later, but whatever, if they put Drew Timmy's numbers on there, I think we're going to see a lot of former Gonzaga Bulldog Drew Timmy tonight. And then also too, for the weekend, the basketball is kind of weird because you don't really know on these bad teams who's playing, who's not, but the Masters is awesome. Go to the PGA tab like Jace was saying too, and any Shane Lowry stuff, just take under, because that's my guy this week, the big Irishman.
Love it. That's prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. If you don't have an account, you can sign up, and if you use the promo code, that helps us, lets them know that you came from us, but also gets you $50 in your account when you place your first $5 lineup. All right, Kyle, we got we have the 52-point third quarter. I think that is in and of itself, right, pops and is a representation of how great the Wolves offense was. But I thought what was instructive about that time is their ability to put Zach Edey and Jaren Jackson Jr. in foul trouble, which they knew at halftime, right? Edey's got 3, Jackson's got 3. If you can get one or both of them to pick up their 4th, you're cooking gas now, right? It's going to be there's no Brandon Clark anymore, so it's going to be like an Aldama and Lamar Stevens front court. If you got it, sub out Edey or Jackson, and 30 seconds into the third quarter, Zach Edey picks up his 4th. 2 minutes after that, Jaren Jackson Jr. picks up his 4th. They both go to the bench, and the Wolves are rolling, right? It was 60. They were down 67-72 at the beginning of that quarter, and then they win that quarter 52-27. And you don't want to say they put the game away because it was a very similar score on Tuesday night against Milwaukee when the fourth quarter started. But nothing more you could have asked out of that third quarter from that team. Attacking what the logical things were to attack to put yourself in a more advantageous position. The offense was smart last night, and the third quarter I thought was representative of that.
It was crazy too during that third quarter where they just blast the Memphis Grizzlies. Their coach took timeouts too, and it didn't work. You know what I mean? He tried to take timeouts. He tried to run some different stuff. I think getting, like you said, Edey and Jackson into foul trouble, a team that was already a little thin, right? Because the Brandon Clark just gives the Wolves hell all the time. I thought it was just looking back at like the box score. I thought it was fascinating last night that the Wolves just said, we are playing 8 guys, whether you like it or not. Sorry, Jalen Clark. I mean, he played like 4 minutes. And the Grizzlies responded by saying, we're only going to play 7, despite all the foul trouble. So, yeah, they're 7 for 8 from 3, I think, in that quarter. It looked exactly, I mean, it's probably like a wet dream for the coaching staff of this is how it should look. The ball was moving. There was that one play where Dante dug in on defense, and I thought he got a concussion. I thought he was dead. And then they went 4-on-5, and then Dante kind of stumbled across half court, got the ball, took a 30-footer, and made it. And that's when you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. They're not concerned with how they played in Milwaukee. But, I mean, that third quarter, I think the original franchise record for most points in a quarter was like 47, and they blew that out of the water too. But you're probably not going to see that all the time, but it also is a good reminder, as pessimistic as we can be sometimes, of when they play the right way and they move the ball and make the extra pass. They were 7 for 8 from 3, but I thought all the looks, if you go back and watch, like they're great looks. It's not weird hand grenade type, no pun intended, like shots. It was just really good offense, a good flow. They had a lot of points around the basket too. And whatever combination they ran, like whatever set they had, whatever pairing was running a play on that possession, it just got them a really good look. And that is, yes, we should talk about the fourth quarter and whatever these last couple of days, but that was a good reminder that I'm sure in film this morning. It's like, hey, if you just make the extra pass, or if you get blitzed and you trust Rudy in the short roll and then he kicks it out, we have so much talent that we can really make a team pay. And I think after they got those 2 bigs in foul trouble and they kind of dictated the fight, it was over for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, you mentioned 7 of 8 from 3, but overall for that quarter, the Wolves only missed 3 shots. 18 of 21s was at 11.
Is that for real?
Yeah, 11 for 11 for 13 from 2 there. And one of the only 3-point miss that they had led to the tip dunk from Ant. Well, that was Julius in the corner and did that. So it was, I mean, that's as good of a quarter as these guys have, obviously played ever. But what I thought was encouraging about it too is, it's been a rough season for this starting unit. You run through some of the numbers of the 5-man combinations. It's disappointing how low you see the Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Randle, and Gobert fivesome be. But, that's the starters out there at the beginning of that third quarter, attacking Edey and Jackson again, just like they did to start the game, which we were talking about before with Randle. And that is, if there is something the Wolves can have overcome during the regular season that is largely gone by the postseason, if they could wave a magic wand and have it be one thing, it would be, I think, to have that starting five start games well, start halves well. How many times has it been like, all right, we're 5 minutes into the game and the score is 8-4, Wolves are down, it's just, it's far too often that that entire first 6-7 minutes of the game when the starting five is out there, or first 6-7 minutes of the third quarter is out there, that start, you're just kind of like, all right, ready for DiVincenzo and Reed to check into the game. Well, they're going to check into the game no matter what. And then Nikhil's going to come in afterwards and they're going to be awesome because you have the best bench in the NBA, but you got to have competence out of that starting five. And they absolutely had that last night again, because I think they picked at the right things. That's what that starting five has to do. They have limited shooting in the starting five. McDaniels, Randle, and Gobert, right? Mm-hmm. You got Conley and Edwards, who are great shooters, but you need to manipulate the defense to put yourself in an advantageous situation, because spreading it and Gobert, Edwards pick and roll, while that's a good thing, the defense is just, we know what you're going to do against that, right? You're going to load up against that, or you're going to put two on Ant and make the others beat you. That's why you need to be attacking for switches, having game plan specific things for each individual player of, hey, if there's 6 on the shot clock, all right, Julius said, you got to go at Jaren Jackson Jr. here. Mm-hmm. But if there's 16, you absolutely do not, and you should not do it there. Get into something else. They did that in both the first quarter and the third quarter. And to me, that was a turning point, or could be a turning point for this starting five of, all right, maybe you guys are figuring out the best way to play together as the five of you.
Yeah, and this is just my take, but watching some of these other teams, I think it's important, and we should talk about the Achilles heel of this team and what happened in the fourth. But I also think in that third quarter, and maybe you disagree, like, there's not all the other teams that are going to make the Western Conference playoffs can give you a 52-point quarter. Like, I know that we've been pretty bearish on this team over the last couple of days because of how they collapsed in epic proportions on Tuesday. But I also think sometimes, like, if you want to be a little bullish, like, when their offense is humming, I didn't think that 52-point quarter was like this magical moment. I thought, they're just playing really good basketball. And yes, they got really hot from three, but isn't that kind of what this team is built around, especially when you bring in these guys off the bench like Dante, Naz, and Nikhil? I mean, Naz has clearly kind of regained his confidence a little bit. So that you're probably not going to see a 52-point quarter in the playoffs as the pace slows down, but their ability to, despite being known maybe still as a defensive team, their ability to really punch you in the face with their offensive weapons by playing the right way. And I really like that thing about, hey, sometimes you're going to get down in the shot clock. Maybe you got pressed bringing the ball up or whatever, and we just need Julius to kind of bail us out. I think he actually did that in the fourth quarter. Mm-hmm. But if there's 16 seconds on the shot clock, like, there's plenty of time to reset. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if we're going to get to him, so I just want to add this plug. But as good as Julius was last night, 31, 10, and 5, 50% shooting, and 44 and 5, 7 for 11 from 3. Mike Conley was far and away a team high plus 29. And I thought he continued to be, to your point about getting a hot start, he's one of those starters. He didn't hit a 3 last night, Mike Conley, he was still plus 29. I think he was and will be for this playoff run again, like the straw that stirs the drink for this team, because when he's out there, I think if there's 16 on the shot clock, he's not going to let Julius ISO. He's going to get them into something. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, he had 9 assists last night. Yeah. I mean, that is, I like that. I mean, the top of the tree here, right, was what Edwards and Randle did last night, but it felt good how the other starting lineup pieces folded in around it. I noted that about Mike, situationally playmaking, drawing in the defense, finding Rudy for a lot of drop-offs were for then Rudy to just catch it, dunk it, right? Were a lot of his assists, but also, spraying it out to a McDaniels who spotted up, or Randle who spotted up. I like how Conley fit there. I like how Gobert folded into this thing. It's like, all right, what can you do for us? You can set a good screen and get Edey onto Julius or an advantageous. Do that. Roll hard. Be a presence underneath the basket, from the dunker spot. I thought it was notable that they got really comfortable leaving him down there, and they would use Nas or Julius as screeners sometimes as well. I thought Rudy folded it. Again, I'm talking about offensively. We'll get to it. This team did not play good defense last night. But how many times, I mean, the answer is never. How many times this season have Edwards and Randle been able to do that at the top? And then you also go, yeah, Mike fit into this nice. Rudy fit into this nice too. Jaden only has 10 points, and I think he only took, 4 shots, 2 for 4 from 3. But that's also kind of amongst that group, right? What you're looking for from Jaden as well, provided Julius and Ant are going as well. I really liked how the starting 5, not only at the top, but the rest of them, folded in around him.
Yeah, and the defense is probably the natural segue here into kind of what fell apart in the fourth. But also, I thought Rudy was really good. Offensively, you can kind of tell when Rudy Gobert is feeling himself because he just dunks the ball rather than try to finesse it around the rim. And I thought last night he was in a game that featured a lot of talented bigs. He played with a physicality that, I mean, when the Grizzlies were humming in that first half, Zach Edey was setting Rudy Gobert like screens. And that was really difficult. I mean, there was that 4-minute stretch where it was just Ant and Ja scoring every possession. And that's probably the defense you want to talk about. But it was a lot of it because Zach Edey was setting really high screens that just got Ja. Okay, Ja, it's full head of steam downhill. I thought Rudy last night, whether he was setting screens or like you said in the dunker spot, played with a physicality that, again, he's just been kind of on one recently since he came back from injury. And maybe he's well rested, maybe he's fully healthy. But they also need him, as we've talked about on this pod ad nauseum. They need him to be dominant because there was a stretch there in the third where he was 5 points and 3 rebounds. And it's okay, we need you, even though they're hitting from 3. And I thought he played a really good second half.
Yeah,
offensively.
It's this. I thought this week was instructive from playing Milwaukee and Memphis. Those are 2 big teams, right? And I kind of looking at it right now of the most likely first round opponents, and there's still only 2 games left. It's crazy. It can go a lot of different directions. But we're looking at Denver, the Clippers, or the Warriors, or the Lakers as the most likely, or that's probably who the first round opponent's going to be, right? Denver's kind of its own thing. We've read that story about 25 times in the last couple of years. We know how the Wolves have to approach that. I think against Golden State and the Lakers, you're looking at needing to impose your size against teams who are deficient at the 5, right? Jackson Hayes, or Quentin Post, Kevon Looney, or just a small Draymond Green out there for the Warriors. The Wolves have to impose that size there, and I felt pretty good about that. I do think though, prior to these last 2 games, I would have had concerns about this team against a big team, a team with a big 5 at the basket. For rim protection purposes, and their ability or inability to exploit that. And that's what brings me to the Clippers, which is, again, a likely first round opponent here. And I know the Wolves have beat the Clippers 3 times this season, but we do need to acknowledge there's a difference in who the Clippers are right now versus who the Clippers were earlier in the season. Obviously, the top line thing is Kawhi being back there, but Zubats has gotten better and better over the course of this season and is a huge variable in that series. And I go to this Milwaukee and Memphis game, and if we again isolate it to the first 3 quarters of both of those games, I go, they did a great job against a big rim protecting center, right? Brook Lopez, they did a great job against Milwaukee. And then what did Milwaukee do in the fourth quarter? Brook Lopez got benched. They functionally played him off the floor. Milwaukee went with the zone, moved Giannis to the 5. That did work for them, but they took care of that big 7-footer archetype. They did the same thing with Edey by attacking him last night in that situation. And as we start thinking about playoff matchups, this is new information that I would now apply to a Clippers matchup specifically. And I think we're looking at, I don't know, 25, 30% chance right now that it is the Clippers that the Wolves draw in the first round. So that's I just wanted to note that in advance of next week when we're doing series previews.
Yeah, I've got nothing for you on that. Do you want to, just because I agree. I mean, that's,
No.
you're seeing this kind of archetype of bigs that the Wolves will probably play against. And again, the Jokic thing is just any topic that involves Nikola Jokic. It's its own thing because he's the best player in the world. But yeah, no one that they're probably going to match up against if they finish this thing out and take care of business on Friday and Sunday at home. They're not like floor spacing bigs, right? In terms of like, I mean, Zubac's, to me, I haven't thought this fully through, but like he's like the most improved player for me this season. He is awesome. Like the Clippers are really good. And last night, Charles Barkley was like, are they the second best team in the West? Sometimes you fall for that, but like he is, I think, a
kind of like when you say Jaden's the second best player of the Wolves. I fall for that sometimes.
Yeah, I get it. I fall for that sometimes. If you watch the Clippers, it's a lot of Harden. Norman Powell's like an all-star, and Kawhi, they're getting a healthy season. Can you bank on that? But Zubac is a lot of what they do, and without him, and they can downsize and they can play different things, but their absolute best version of themselves is when he's on the court. And he's not going to space the floor, but he's also maybe one of the most physically imposing. He kind of gives me Valanciunas vibes sometimes. So that's going to be a big thing for Rudy and to a lesser extent, Julius and Nas to kind of think about. But yeah, it does give you a little bit more data of like how this could look, because a week from now, it's going to be, how does Rudy Gobert match up against blank center on the opposing team?
I do want to look ahead, kind of to the week ahead here, but let's grab our second break here. Today's show is brought to you by PXG. It's the Masters. It's golf time. Spring is here. The time has come to get some new golf clubs, and that means it's time to head to your local PXG store for a fitting. PXG makes the best golf clubs, period. I've been telling you, I went over to PXG at Southdale Mall a few weeks ago to get fitted for clubs. Kind of had no idea what the process of that would look like. I'm like, all right, you're going to film me while I'm hitting the ball into the little driving range thing here. What is that going to do? I thought I was going to Topgolf, and it was a very different experience of like the science behind it actually really like interests me. And they would change the angle of the club head and have me swing again. I'm like, okay, that one went straight, adding the weight to, or taking off weight from the bottom of the club head. It was just really interesting to me. And my experience as a very casual amateur golfer is that's what's so annoying to me when I golf is it takes me 6 holes to figure out how I need to be swinging to fit my clubs on that given day. I think by using PXG clubs now, that's going to be a different experience for me. And I would, if you're thinking about it, you're saying, hey, this is going to be a big summer for golf for me. The fastest way to improve your performance on the golf course is a PXG fitting. You can schedule your fitting today, and for a limited time, you could save up to 20% on your entire order. Head over to pxg.com/DaneMoore. That's in the show notes. That's pxg.com/DaneMoore to save up to 20% on your entire order. pxg.com/DaneMoore. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hey, you're Ant, but I'm Julius, so it's my ball for a sec. I just want to add on to that. People wear suits and tuxes all the time. They fit better when you go get them personally customized fitted. So if you're like this golf club fitting thing and PXG and what they're doing, like it's a real big thing. I'm so glad that my friend Dane got a nice PXG sponsor when I'm the one that golfs all the time. But it's really important, and they do a really, really good job, because if you get fitted for clubs, you're like, if you're going to go golf, and golf's expensive and all that stuff in 4 or 5 hours, like you should have a suit that fits you, not just fits anyone, like fits you. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you got to go test it out, because it's going to be a big summer of golf for the both of us. And now you have no reason to not participate. So you wanted to look ahead. I selfishly, can we do like 2 or 3 minutes just on, we didn't really fully talk about the defense yet in that game. And then also I haven't talked to you on here since the Bucks game. So I'll just throw this to you and then you can take it wherever. But I agree with Britt. I kind of said it that night that I thought the Bucks loss, 24-point lead, was the single worst loss in franchise history in the regular season because of what it meant. I digest it. I also don't think they beat the Bucks last night if they don't have that happen to them. And that sucks, but like that's just kind of how this team is. And I thought last night again, when they have a big lead and it is kind of cratering, thought it was hilarious that Chris Finch called a timeout and then ran a set play to get Jaden McDaniels a corner three. Sometimes I feel like he's trolling us. Jaden hit it to stop the bleeding, but as bad as the Bucks thing was and everyone on the team looking shell-shocked, I thought last night when it was happening to them again, they had learned from it. Now, what does that mean moving forward? Maybe nothing. But I thought last night watching that game that they looked far more. My frustration was there was no poise and composure against the Bucks.
Mhm.
I thought they looked a little more poised and had more composure last night. And the way that they stopped the bleeding was they actually locked in for a couple possessions and played good defense. And that to me is how that's what they should focus on. It's not just, can we get some buckets when a team is making a run? Can we actually just get some stops? Can we make them work and then get a rebound, slow the game down? What did you think?
Yeah. I want to talk about the defense. Can I just say something on what I was thinking about in the 48 hours after the Milwaukee game and leading into the Memphis game of like, okay, the Wolves we said they have this baked into their DNA. They have this gene of, letting up when it seems safe to let up, even if it isn't. I'm like, okay, how is this like practically relevant to the playoffs? And it was dark 48 hours. That was a bad game. And I was like, you know what? I could see this rearing its head in the playoffs being like, they're playing someone and that team's best player gets hurt or second best player gets hurt. Now they're out for this, happens in the playoffs all the time. And it's like, you're a sprained ankle away from going to the finals, right? I feel like that could have the inverse impact on the Wolves, where if like they're playing the Clippers and Harden rolls his ankle in game one, and he's out for the rest of the series. What I was thinking 48 hours ago, so I was like, man, that makes me be like, they could lose this series, right? It doesn't shift the odds in a meaningful way. I think that was helped out by the game last night. He goes, okay, let's move off of that. That's a little dark. That's a little much. I think where I'm at now is if they get up 2-0 in a series, I'm just for sure think the other team will win the third game. There's just that is in there. And I think that's where it could, rear its head in the playoffs, I guess in a little bit more of like a macro sense in the playoffs. If they're up 20-15 going into a fourth, are we concerned about it? Yeah, probably. Hopefully the little more playoff juice negates a little bit of that. We have seen a track record of Ant staying a little bit more locked in the playoffs than we do during the regular season. So I don't know. I'm sure they'll blow a game in the playoffs or something like that. But that a lot of teams will. That's stay within like one standard deviation of like that type of chaos. I think it's the mental test for like the macro view of a series where you're like, all right, somebody's hurt. Wolves are up 2-0 and a letdown. Because what we're talking about, the thing baked into their DNA is their willingness to have a letdown, right?
Yeah.
Or the frequency that they have letdowns.
And then we can transition to wherever you want to go. But they're up 24 against the Bucks in a game where both teams don't play the next night. Both teams need to win because the Bucks are still fighting for some playoff seeding, and the Wolves just absolutely shit it down their leg. And then last night, I know I've learned recently doing pods with you and being recorded that I swear too much. I knew I swore too much, but actually having it put back in my face was like, hey, you have a problem. I think them realizing 48 hours ago, like, hey, we have a problem, and it being put in their face at such a high moment in the season might have been good. I know that sounds like coping, but I was thinking last night when they're down 20, the Grizzlies are down 20, and they had a second night of a back-to-back across the country in Denver. I think if the Wolves would have closed out the Bucks on Tuesday and won by 20, I think the Grizzlies would have pulled their guys much earlier in the game because we're down 20. We got to rest for another must-win game against Denver. But the fact that they grind it all the way towards almost the end, it's because, as you've said too, like their Achilles heel now is on display. This team will give you a massive run. And I just wonder, and maybe I'm wrong, I wonder if it was good for them to have that out there, for them to be like, hey, this is our Achilles heel. Everyone knows it, because I was saying to you, this team can score 52 points. They can have a big run. They can, be up 2-0 in a series. But every other team now in the Western Conference, Steve Kerr, Ty Lue, JJ Redick, whoever they play, that is going to be hammered home in the second half. As the Wolves are making runs and playing good basketball, those coaches are going to say, just hang on. Just hold on to the rope a little bit because they are going to give in. And last night it kind of happened again. I thought it was not as egregious as the Bucks game, but that's just something to monitor because this team, when they click, as we said in segment 2, they can give you 52 points. But when Ant had a weird turnover and they were doing those lackadaisical things again, it's like that stuff has to go away because these other teams are going to, just like you hunt a mismatch or you try to get advantages, every other team right now will think come playoff time that they have an advantage against Minnesota because once they get a big lead, they just don't take it seriously.
Yeah, they should think that, right? That should be
on display
on the scout, right? Of like, you want to attack, you want to put Gobert in space, you want to force Edwards into the mid-range, whatever. Like on all their many bullets, like that will be on there. I think this weekend, kind of looking ahead to this weekend, but relating it back to last night. I think the goal of these last 2 games, Nets, Jazz, outside of taking business, be like, can you give me great defense, right? Like that's the thing. Can you focus on that? We just saw the offense last night, but let's lock that defense back in against lesser opponents, really get into understanding and appreciating the value of their shell defense and executing out of that, staying connected to their man. In the first half, it was ridiculous how many times guys would just, Ant or Jaden would be guarding them and they would just walk away from them while their head was turned and now they're wide open for a cut to the basket or a corner 3. The Wolves were absolutely not locked in last night from a defensive side of the ball. And I was looking into like some numbers. I told you they had a offensive rating of over 130 last night. That was the 12th game they've done that this season. It's really good effective offense. In only 2 of those 12 games have they had a better than league average defensive game from a points per possession allowed standpoint. And I get that's true in all basketball, right? When one team's scoring more and at a higher clip, the other team does, it becomes a back and forth. You talk about John Ant back and forth, that sort of way. The thing is if it's your if you are a team with a defensive identity and that is the best thing that you do, you then need to be capitalizing on your relatively rare elite offensive games where Julius Randle is hitting 6 of his 7 mid-range shots and Ant is hitting 7 of his 11 threes in the game by playing a locked-in version of half-court defense. And what too often happens with this team is like, it's the same, letting loose sort of thing of like, well, we're scoring. So, they were kind of joking about it in the Denver locker room after that game. It's like, we were just praying he missed, just praying Jokic missed. Like, it can't be in the playoffs, that type of energy defensively when your offense is going, because what's going to happen is against a higher level of opponent, you're going to have teams who are able to score with you. In those 12 games that they've had a 130 plus offensive rating, they're 11-1. The one game they lost, who they played? Boston. Because Boston can score at that clip. Man, Boston scores at a 120 plus clip all the time, right? They don't have to do that much to be able to keep up with you, even when you're having a supernova Ant game, supernova Randle game. That's as you get further into the playoffs, or if you get a team who can do that in even the first round of the playoffs, like that defense has to be there too. So I think an extremely encouraging game. It's just if I'm Finch, Nori, and the coaching staff right now, I'm like, all right, Nets and Jazz this weekend, defense. Let's get that back in to our collective psyche. We executed against these 2 teams. Now let's take that energy into a week of practice where we are defensively going game plan specific for Kawhi Leonard, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, whatever it might be. Like, I think it is very important to have that defensive cohesiveness and buy-in to the idea that is their identity. Because you know what they do a lot more than when they have this good of offensive games? Defensive games, right? This is still what this team is. Offense is, it's the Wolves offense is hitting 16 and blackjack too, right? Like it's work sometimes, but like it's often not going to. I just think the defensive part is important.
Bet 100. I will say to your point. I mean, this has nothing to do with this weekend and the easy schedule they have compared to some of the other teams they're fighting with in the West. Who like Clippers Warriors play on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's a massive game. But that's always been one of my biggest frustrations with this team, this coaching staff, these star players, whatever. This version of it all is that if the Wolves will not, I'm not even jinxing it, the Wolves will not lose either of these games if they play really good defense. But if they just turn it into one of those, we know we're going to win, we can just outscore them type things, and you let the Isaiah Colliers of the world, the Drew Timmeys just get 20, 22, like that is a confidence builder for them that then will bite you in the ass come those last 4 minutes of the game when you are just not a clutch time game. So I'm with you. Like, I'm not looking for them to have a 52-point quarter in the next two games. I'm looking for them to hold one of these two opponents that are both very much trying to lose games while Minnesota's trying to win games. I want to see them hold one of these teams like a 14-point quarter, because that will just be very indicative of what this team's mentality is. Because, and I don't know if you have anything else, but I kind of wanted to throw just some random fun facts at you as we close down this regular season, because the next time we talk will be a postseason podcast. But I think back to game 82 of last year when how the vibes were really bad and they lose to the Suns. I think the Suns swept the Wolves. And I referenced that a lot because then the vibes that whole week were really bad and they go sweep the Suns. But Jace and I were texting this morning. Do you remember game 81? Do you remember anything? Like, just when I say game 81 to you, the listener, does that ring a bell?
No, to the me, no, it doesn't.
Remember when they played the Hawks in game 81 and the Hawks were solidified? They just wanted to stay in that draft position.
Mm-hmm.
And the Wolves needed to win because remember, all of a sudden they're falling apart, and Denver and OKC, they're all trying to battle for a top seed. And the Hawks sat all of their starters in the fourth quarter, and the Wolves did come back and win, but it was against reserves. I just thought that was...
I kind of remember that, yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with this. I just was like, oh my God, I also forgot about that too, that like, don't get into one of those situations again where it's like, oh my God, we really need, Jordy Fernandez to sit down tonight and sit all his guys. We can just take care of business in those first 24 minutes, because unlike Memphis and unlike Milwaukee that were like, hey, if we keep it close, we know we can come back. We need this game. The Nets and Jazz don't need this game. Mm-hmm. So it's all about defense this weekend. If you can lock them down early, that should force the coach to open up the roster a little bit more and maybe give Jalen Clark a few more minutes. Some of these energy guys that will give you hard energy for a little bit. It's going to be fascinating to watch these next two games, because as this zigs and zags, as bad as Tuesday was, as good as last night was, there is no team in the West right now that is fighting for playoff seeding that has an easier remaining weekend schedule than Minnesota.
Yeah, let's go into this. I'm just going to pull up that tweet I had from last night because I was just going through the games for tonight, right? We got Nets at Wolves, Clippers at Kings, Warriors at Blazers, Rockets at Lakers, Grizzlies at Nuggets. So we have all six of the teams that the Wolves are fighting with from 3 to 8 in the mix there. And what I just went through is if one of the Grizzlies or Nuggets have to lose, right? So if we assume everybody else wins, which I think that the odds would suggest that they will, and the Grizzlies beat the Nuggets, the Wolves are 48 and 33, and they will be in a 4-way tie with Golden State, Memphis, Minnesota, and Denver. And that will, so they'd be like the 7 seed going into the last game of the season with the Lakers and the Clippers ahead of them in the 3 and the 4. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a bummer. 7 seed. I thought this would be better if the Wolves won. And now the Nuggets have caught a loss because they played the Grizzlies. But it's the same thing on the other side too. If everyone wins and the Nuggets beat the Grizzlies, okay, you got the Lakers in the 3 at 50 and 31. You'd have the Clippers in the 4 at 49 and 32. Denver would be tied with the Clippers in the 4 at 49 and 32. Golden State, Minnesota and Minnesota would be tied at 48 and 43. Golden State has that tiebreaker. So the Wolves are at the 7 again, with Memphis down in the 8 at 47 and 44. But if you remember that there's game 82 as well, the Wolves then go into game 82 against the Jazz as the 7 seed going into that final day. And the Clippers and the Warriors have to, as you just said, have to play each other in their game 82. So one of those teams will lose. That makes it so if the Wolves beat the Jazz after beating the Nets, that they vault themselves up to at least 6th. And it could be even higher than that. There's actually a lot of like 5 seed scenarios that I think are likely to happen. I just kind of wanted to note that, if you're maybe even listening to this on Saturday morning and you're looking at the standings, like, ooh, Wolves 7. Just
Great
know
point.
that if they win game 82 against the Jazz, that one of the Clippers or Warriors have to lose in their game 82, and the Wolves will then be up out of the play-in, playing there, and based on who it is, and maybe they could catch some luck somewhere else, and one of these teams fumble one like the Wolves did against the Bucks or the Warriors did against the Spurs on Wednesday, and you're even higher, and now you're at 6th, 5th, 4th. Those are all within the realm of possibilities this weekend, provided they take care of the Nets and the Jazz in these two.
Yeah, and again, shout out to our friend Jace Frederick because he's doing the Lord's work right now. He's
Yeah,
breaking down every single angle. It makes my head hurt. It's like the Zach Galifianakis.
He texted that to me at 3:37 a.m. last night, and goes, "Put these." I was asleep, but I was. Yeah, he has been grinding on these tiebreaker scenarios. That's at TwinCities.com. Sorry, cut you off.
No, that's probably because the first tee off in Augusta was like 20 minutes later. So Jace was up just like I was.
Didn't sleep.
And also, bang, we're kind of wrapping it up for the week. Again, this is probably the last regular season pod. You and I will do a couple games this weekend, and then we'll figure out where this team plays, when they play, who they play, and we'll get into postseason mode. But I'm a big fan of accountability. So as we talk about tonight's Wolves-Nets game, I just want to apologize because last night I tweeted something that was wrong. I said that the Minnesota Timberwolves were 18-point favorites against the Brooklyn Nets tonight. And I want to apologize because that was wrong. They are 20-point favorites now against the Brooklyn Nets. A little research. I think that might be the biggest spread of any game this season. They have, again, as bad as Tuesday was, and it was the low point of maybe my life. Wednesday, you wake up and the Warriors lose as 17.5-point favorites at home to a Spurs team that is not playing for anything. And it kind of did reset them. So I'm really glad that you said like too long, didn't read. If you wake up tomorrow and this is the first time you're listening to the pod and the Wolves do beat the Nets, hold on to beat Drew Timme, they might not be in the standing position that you want, but that's because this is like a parlay. If they just win out, there are I don't even know, is there any? If the Wolves win out,
none. There's 6 or better.
If the Minnesota Timberwolves win out, they get a week off. And to me, I think after all the pods we've done, and it all started with this crazy trade, 48 hours for me today, if this team, despite their flaws and despite all of the people you want to scapegoat, and sometimes they're all worthy of getting criticism, if they wake up Monday morning and they're a top 6 team in the Western Conference, I don't know who wants to play them, despite all the issues they have. Like, that is still a team that has the talent, and we've seen it again against Milwaukee. If they close that Milwaukee game out and beat the Grizzlies, we're waking up today and people are glazing them as like, this might be the dark horse in the West. So they always zig when you zag. I am not confident that they are going to sweep a home series this weekend against 2 tanking teams, but it's a lot better for them now than having to be, Clippers Warriors. That's brutal, man. That is the game of the weekend on Sunday because one of those teams has to lose and one of those teams is going to fall in the playoff race. So it's a big weekend for the NBA, but if you're a Wolves fan and you survived Tuesday and then you saw what happened last night, just top 5 movie for me of all time is Lion King, but this is like the it is time moment. Like, the Wolves have it at their fingertips. They can put away all those bad Milwaukee Bucks losses and Wizards losses to get into a top 6 and then really scout. And I don't know how they match up against the Clippers or the Lakers, but they have an opportunity to erase a lot of demons by just playing hard basketball for the next couple of nights. And if they play good defense, they will reward themselves with what I think is the most important thing, and that's getting out of the play-in. No matter who they could play, you just don't want to be a play-in team because it's extra fatigue. It's less time to scout. There's so many issues that come with that. So it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I would say to the not wanting to play the Wolves teams, I think you know who you are because you're the teams who don't have matchups for Ant specifically, and Randall, right? Like, that's why they beat the Suns as Ant. I'm not saying they couldn't have beat other people, but they did not have the combination of point of attack defense on Ant with rim protection to be able to negate him, right? Phoenix did not have that. And Denver did not have that in their series against the Wolves too. Like, I'm not trying to take away from the Wolves going to the Western Conference Finals last season, but it's maybe a different story if you're playing a team who has personnel better catered to being able to control Ant at the point of attack and, be able to defend the rim simultaneously, right? If the standings shake out a little bit differently, Devontae Graham doesn't hit that shot against the Denver Nuggets last year. And it's
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, it's Wolves Thunder in the second round last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's the same sort of thing for the Wolves, because you have, as the Thunder, different defensive personnel to be able to slow Ant, and now in this case, Julius Randle as well. And this is pretty irrelevant, or definitely irrelevant if the Wolves take care of business this weekend. But I've never agreed with I'd rather just play the Thunder than the Lakers sort of idea. The Thunder are a problem for the Wolves, obviously, because they're just the best team in the Western Conference right now. But from a practical matchup standpoint, where they can put Dort on Ant, they can have rim protection on the backside there for Ant, while also putting Jalen Williams on Julius Randle. Who else has all that? Who else has all that for the Wolves and their primary things? There are matchups strewn about the Western Conference of their potential matchups, where you are going to have point of attack and rim defense issues for Ant. You're going to have matchup problems for Julius Randle, and you're going to have problems with keeping Rudy Gobert off of the offensive glass and from being a force around the basket. Matchups, we've been saying this for literally months now. Matchups are what really matters in this situation. And I think the Wolves have done themselves a good deed in being more threatening to more of these Western Conference teams. Last night being a good example of that, of hey, look, if Julius Randle is a threat here too, if you don't have a matchup for him while also not having a matchup for Ant, good luck, right? Good luck to any of those teams. It's just, then the Wolves offense the train is going to start moving. If you're able to slow those things, that's when the Wolves, they need to tap into other things. Now we need Dante DiVincenzo to have a couple big games to win from you. Nas to do that. The defense needs to be locked in. A lot of these teams, Memphis highlighted themselves as one last night, do not have the matchups for Ant, Randle, and Gobert. And if the Wolves find themselves in a series like that, where maybe they have the clear advantage in even just two of those three things, yeah, that's how we start talking about an upset, right? And it logically, not just because we're the Wolves are Ant, this is the playoffs. This is the stuff that shifts it, along with having a star player who can elevate to another level. We just kind of know that about Ant, that he has that gear. That gear plus a advantageous matchup situation, yes, you should be concerned about the Wolves as your first round playoff matchup.
Yeah, we do a lot of these pods, and it's like Oregon spring, where it's sunny outside, and then we publish it, and it starts raining, or vice versa. So I know, again, 20-point favorites at home, but I really do believe, I would say if I covered the Thunder, if this team can take care of business, it could be a far worse road, and maybe this team needs a worse road. I don't know, but they have the opportunity now, as you just summed up, to get out of the play-in, avoid that 1 game, 48-minute, anything can happen type scenario. And then when it gets into the playoffs, and this is my one thing that I don't think we talk about enough, because we cover the Wolves and the whatever, the vibes are low, and all these other teams like the Thunder are killing it. They're set up so well. And look at the Rockets. As soon as the playoffs are formalized in the West and there's 8 teams, 4 of those teams will not advance, and 4 of those teams will have tremendously volatile off seasons. So for the Wolves to just get in and solidify themselves and have that week, we've seen under Chris Finch, they've only done this once, right? Or is it once or twice, where they've had a full week off to scout, and they blew the Suns out. And obviously we've learned now that the Suns are kind of paper mache, but I just think that if they can get into a top 6 seed by taking care of business, if the Lakers or the Clippers or the Rockets or the Nuggets or the Thunder or the Grizzlies, if any of those teams bows out in the first round because Minnesota beat them, those teams are going to have drastic changes, just like Minnesota probably would if they had, whatever. So they just got to get there. It looked very unlikely 48 hours ago, 24 hours ago. They did what they needed to do last night, and now they have the easiest path in the West to solidify themselves in a top 6, and I'm so scared.
I will text you to check in on you if it's 46-45 at the end of 2.
Go back and look.
Wolves
I
got
did a
split.
terrible job of setting that up, but shout out to Jace. Go back and look at like what happened in that Hawks game. It's like, oh my God, the Wolves are going to piss it down their leg. And then the Hawks are like, you know what?
I remember it now.
Trae Young, like we'll just sit everybody. I just can't wait till tonight. I mean, there's no D'Lo tonight. There's no revenge factor. But it just, when it's like 91-90 in the fourth and Drew Timme hits like a pick and pop 3, just welfare check me. Because it's going to be it's been a crazy week. It's been a crazy season. But I think if you told me that night that they traded Carl and all that stuff, and then all those 7 months of chaos that we've kind of been going up and down on this roller coaster, that the Wolves have 2 home games against tanking teams in the final weekend of the regular season to get a top 6 seed, I would have taken that easily. So we'll see what happens later tonight at Target Center.
Appreciate you, man. That's a good place, I think, to wrap it. There will not be a pod off of tonight's Nets game. Jason and I will recap the epic back-to-back against the Nets and Jazz on Monday morning, and we'll start setting the table for what their playoff matchup is going to look like. And can't totally plan out all that stuff right now because we got to look at who the matchups are, where we're going, all those sort of things. But we'll give you a loaded week of episodes, and I'm sure we'll have Kyle back on here before that series starts as well. So appreciate you, man.
Good weekend. Let's get it.
Until Monday with Jace Frederick. He's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling